11 agents, 40 seconds, no diplomatic cover. In May 1960, Mossad launched Operation Black Tulip and risked an international crisis to kidnap Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust's logistics, right off of Buenos Aires Street. Eichmann had vanished into Argentina by forging a new identity, but a chain of chance encounters and survivor testimonies exposed his hiding place. This wasn't just vengeance, it was a race against time, law, and global indifference, where a clerical signature could mean freedom for a mass murderer. But how did a secret team outmaneuver sovereign borders and bring a ghost to public trial? The answers lie where bureaucracy, espionage, and justice collided. Adolf Eichmann's escape from Europe began not with a midnight dash, but with a signature on a piece of paper. In the summer of 1950, as war crimes prosecutors combed through the ruins of the Third Reich, Eichmann walked into the International Red Cross office in Genoa. He presented himself as Ricardo Klement, a stateless technician seeking a new life. The Red Cross, overwhelmed by hundreds of thousands of displaced persons, issued him a travel document. The name, the birth date, even the place of birth, Bolzano, Italy, were fabrications. The photo on the card belonged to a man wanted by half the world, but the paperwork said otherwise. The Vatican ratlines, already infamous for spiriting out Ustache and SS men, provided the next link. Catholic clergy in Rome offered safe lodgings, discreet guidance, and letters of recommendation. In the shadows of monasteries and refugee offices, Eichmann's new identity was reinforced at every checkpoint. Father Edward Demeter, a Hungarian Franciscan, helped finalize the documentation. Bishop Alois Hudal, known for his sympathy to Nazi fugitives, wrote directly to Argentine authorities requesting entry visas for men like Klement. These connections turned forged identity into state-sanctioned passage. On July 14, 1950, the ship Giovanna C. set out from Genoa. Among the passengers, Ricardo Klement kept to himself, clutching a battered suitcase and a letter from the Red Cross. The voyage ended in Buenos Aires, where the port authorities processed his papers without question. Argentina, under Juan Perón, had become a haven for thousands of European refugees, many of them with a past to hide. The Perón government actively recruited German technicians, and the German expatriate community in Buenos Aires provided jobs, housing, and a ready-made social circle for new arrivals. Eichmann settled first in a modest boarding house, then moved his family to a small home in the San Fernando suburb. He found work as a mechanic and later secured a position at the Mercedes-Benz plant, rising to department head. For years, he lived as Klement, blending into the routine of factory shifts and suburban life. His sons attended local schools, and his wife Vera kept their German roots alive at home. But the Eichmann name never fully vanished. His eldest son, Klaus, insisted on using the family surname, a detail that would become critical years later. The machinery that had dispatched millions to their deaths had now been replaced by the machinery of bureaucracy. Red Cross papers, a priest's signature, a visa stamp. Each step on the ratline turned a fugitive into a citizen. Eichmann's escape was not a product of daring or disguise, but of paperwork that erased the past as thoroughly as any fire. For a decade, the architect of the final solution lived untroubled among the jacaranda trees and tram lines of Buenos Aires, protected less by secrecy than by the indifference and complicity of officialdom. Lothar Hermann had lived for years in the quiet suburbs of Buenos Aires, his past as a German Jewish survivor hidden behind routine and silence. Blind from injuries inflicted in Dachau, he kept his family's history from his daughter Silvia. In 1956, Silvia struck up a friendship with Klaus Eichmann, a brash teenager who boasted about his father's wartime exploits. When Klaus let slip that his father had held a high SS rank, Hermann's suspicions sharpened. He pressed Silvia for details, asking her to visit the Klement household and listen for any sign of the truth. One evening, Silvia returned unsettled. Klaus's father, introduced as Ricardo Klement, had a distinctly German accent, and family photos hinted at a past that didn't fit the story. Hermann began writing letters. He reached out to Jewish organizations in Buenos Aires, but his warnings were met with skepticism or bureaucratic indifference. The details, a German technician, a family using the name Klement, a son proud of the Eichmann surname, were not enough for local officials. Frustrated, Hermann turned to Germany. His letter landed on the desk of Fritz Bauer, the chief prosecutor of Hesse, who had returned from wartime exile, determined to pursue Nazi criminals wherever they hid. Bauer, a Jew and a socialist, faced a justice system still riddled with former Nazis and sympathizers. He knew that any official inquiry risked tipping off Eichmann or his protectors. In 1957, Bauer made a calculated decision. Rather than trust his own government, he contacted the Israeli consulate in Frankfurt, passing along Hermann's information with a warning. German authorities could not be relied upon for discretion or resolve. The tip outlined a family in San Fernando, a man named Klement, a son named Klaus, and a pattern of behavior that matched the fugitive's profile. Bauer's gamble was not without risk. Under West German law, sharing such intelligence with a foreign service bordered on treason. Yet, he understood the stakes. If Eichmann was warned, he would vanish again, slipping into another life behind new papers. The information was relayed to Mossad. Isser Harel, the agency's chief, treated the lead with caution. Previous sightings had proven false, and the consequences of a misstep could be catastrophic. Still, the details were compelling. Mossad assigned Zvi Aharoni to quietly verify the tip. Aharoni's surveillance confirmed the presence of a man who matched Eichmann's wartime photos. The clincher came from a technical comparison: ear shape, a biometric signature that rarely lies. The man on Garibaldi Street was not just Ricardo Klement. He was Adolf Eichmann, living in plain sight under a false name, his past almost erased by a decade of indifference and paperwork. The chain that began with a survivor's vigilance and a daughter's uneasy visit had now triggered an international manhunt. For Mossad, the tip was no longer a rumor. It was actionable intelligence. For Bauer, the decision to bypass his own government had paid off, but at personal risk that would shadow him for the rest of his career. The hunt for Eichmann had moved from rumor to reality, and the machinery of justice had begun to turn. In early 1960, as Buenos Aires slipped into autumn, a small Mossad team began a quiet, methodical watch over a modest house on Garibaldi Street. 11 agents, each with a separate cover story and a local routine, blended into the German-speaking neighborhoods north of the city. Their task was not to surveil an embassy or a government official, but to confirm the identity of a man who had erased himself from the post-war world, Ricardo Klement, suspected to be Adolf Eichmann. Isser Harel, Mossad's chief, ran the operation from a safe house, while Zvi Aharoni, the agency's lead investigator, became the architect of the identification phase. Aharoni's German was flawless, his instincts sharpened by years of interrogations and fieldwork. He mapped Eichmann's daily patterns with clinical precision. Every evening, a man matching Eichmann's wartime build and gait stepped off the 7:40 p.m. bus from the Mercedes-Benz plant, walked the same cracked sidewalk, and disappeared behind a garden gate. No bodyguards, no elaborate security, only a routine so predictable it seemed designed to invite scrutiny. Routine alone could not close the case. Mossad needed a biometric certainty. Aharoni, using a camera disguised in a briefcase, captured a series of candid images as the suspect lingered at his gate. The photographs, developed in a local shop, were rushed to Israeli police labs. Israeli analysts performed a 10-point comparison of the man's left ear, its curve, lobule, and helix, against an SS file photo from 1942. Ear morphology, nearly as unique as a fingerprint, became the linchpin. The lab's conclusion, a probable match. For Harel, the margin of doubt narrowed to a sliver. The agents logged every movement, the precise minute the bus arrived, which groceries were carried home, the timing of lights switching on and off. They documented the family's rhythms, the comings and goings of his wife Vera and their sons. They noted the absence of visitors, the lack of visible weapons, the simple construction of the house. No fence, just a fiberboard door and unplastered walls. The neighborhood, mostly working class, provided cover for both predator and prey. Aharoni's reports flowed nightly to Harel. Each new detail, Eichmann's habit of waiting for his son to open the gate, the specific bus line he favored, fed into a growing operational file. The team rehearsed contingencies. If Eichmann took a different route, if he was accompanied, if local police appeared. But the subject's discipline never wavered. He returned night after night by the same path, at the same hour. The final confirmation came not from a dramatic confrontation, but from the silent accumulation of evidence. The man known as Klement was living under a name that had outlasted its usefulness. For Mossad, the preparation was complete. The agents had mapped not just a routine, but a vulnerability. A window of 40 seconds, a stretch of empty sidewalk, and a man whose past could no longer remain hidden. The groundwork was finished. The capture could now be planned with the certainty that only meticulous surveillance provides. Rain began to fall on Garibaldi Street as dusk settled over San Fernando. At 7:40 p.m., the bus from the Mercedes-Benz plant hissed to a stop. Adolf Eichmann stepped down, his collar turned up, a battered briefcase in hand. Two cars waited, one idling near the curb, the other parked 30 yards behind. Inside, Mossad agents rehearsed the plan. Gloves on, code words memorized, eyes fixed on the narrow window that would close in less than a minute. Peter Malkin, dressed as a local passerby, moved first. He approached from behind, matching Eichmann's pace. "Un momentito, señor," he said, voice steady. Eichmann hesitated, then tried to sidestep. Malkin's arm shot out. In one practiced motion, he seized Eichmann's neck and shoulders, dragging him off the sidewalk. Rafi Eitan and another agent closed in, forcing Eichmann to the ground as he let out a guttural cry. The team bundled him under a blanket, pressed him to the floor of the rear seat, and slammed the door. The entire snatch, from first contact to getaway, lasted just 40 seconds. The car sped through the back streets, headlights off. Eichmann, bound and blindfolded, lay wedged between the seats as the agents drove to a rented safe house. There, the team switched from brute force to methodical verification. They checked the scar on his left arm where the SS blood group tattoo had been removed, noted the appendectomy scar, and questioned him in German about his wartime assignments. Within hours, the man who had vanished behind false papers and a decade of routine admitted his true name. "Ich bin Adolf Eichmann." For 9 days, Eichmann remained in the safe house, watched by agents who took turns guarding him. He was kept handcuffed to a bed, eyes shielded to prevent him from identifying the location or his captors. During this time, Mossad operatives presented him with a document. Written in German, it stated that he, Adolf Eichmann, agreed of his own free will to stand trial in Israel. The agents insisted on a signature, believing it would provide a legal fig leaf for his removal. After hours of negotiation and reminders that his fate was sealed either way, Eichmann signed. The statement was copied, translated, and forwarded to Israeli authorities, who would later use it in their diplomatic response to Argentina. Meanwhile, preparations for exfiltration moved into their final phase. The Israeli delegation was scheduled to depart Buenos Aires on May 20th after attending Argentina's 150th independence celebrations. The same El Britannia that had brought them would carry Eichmann out, if he could be disguised convincingly. On the morning of departure, Mossad's anesthesiologist, Dr. Yona Elian, administered a sedative. Agents dressed Eichmann in an El Al crew uniform, complete with forged ID and a neck brace to explain his apparent illness. He was wheeled through the airport as a crewman recovering from a head injury, eyes shielded, features obscured by a cap and dark glasses. Argentine officials, unaware of the deception, cleared the group for departure after a tense delay. The engines roared to life. As the aircraft lifted off, the agents exhaled for the first time in days. 11 days after his abduction, Adolf Eichmann was airborne, bound for Tel Aviv. The operation, 11 agents, 40 seconds of violence, and a 9-day masquerade, had succeeded where a decade of extradition requests had failed. The architect of the final solution was now in Israeli custody, his fate sealed by a signature and a flight plan no one in Buenos Aires had anticipated. Rain fell in New York as the United Nations Security Council convened on June 22, 1960. Argentina's ambassador, Dr. Mario Amadeo, took his seat at the circular table, a copy of the formal complaint before him. The charge was direct. Israeli agents had crossed sovereign borders, seized a man on Argentine soil, and spirited him away without a word to local authorities. Amadeo's voice, measured and precise, framed the issue as a test of international order. If one state could abduct a suspect at will, what shield remained for any nation's sovereignty? The question, he warned, was not only about Eichmann, but about the rules that kept the world from descending into chaos. Golda Meir, Israel's foreign minister, countered with a different set of facts. She acknowledged the breach but urged the council to weigh the gravity of Eichmann's crimes. The man in question had orchestrated the machinery of mass murder. The world, she insisted, had a stake in seeing him answer for it. Israel had received no cooperation from Argentina in seeking extradition. Meir described the operation as an isolated act, motivated not by disregard for Argentina, but by the imperative to bring a principal architect of genocide to justice. She stopped short of apology, instead offering a statement of regret and a plea for understanding. The council chamber filled with competing arguments. The Soviet delegate pressed Argentina. Would it demand Eichmann West's return? Amadeo sidestepped, refusing to call for repatriation, but insisting on appropriate reparation. The American representative, Henry Cabot Lodge, proposed a middle ground, condemned the breach of sovereignty, but also recognized the universal outrage at Nazi crimes. Britain and France echoed this line, suggesting that Israel's expression of regret might suffice as reparation. The Soviet Union and Poland abstained, unwilling to endorse any outcome that might appear to legitimize the abduction or, conversely, to shield Eichmann. On June 23, the Security Council delivered its verdict. Resolution 138 passed by 8 votes, with Argentina recusing itself and 2 abstentions. The text was unambiguous. Acts that violate the sovereignty of a member state and cause international friction could, if repeated, endanger peace and security. The Council requested Israel make appropriate reparation, citing the UN Charter and the rules of international law. Yet, embedded in the preamble was a caveat. Nothing in the resolution should be read as condoning the crimes of which Eichmann stood accused. The document closed with a hope that Argentina and Israel would restore their traditionally friendly relations. The legal language was clear, but the diplomatic reality was more nuanced. While Israel had breached the letter of international law, the Council stopped short of demanding Eichmann's return. The world's outrage over Nazi atrocities hung over the proceedings, shaping a response that condemned the method but did not challenge the outcome. In the months that followed, Israel and Argentina issued a joint communiqué acknowledging the violation but declaring the dispute closed. The Security Council's resolution, stamped and filed, left a precedent. Justice across borders carries a price, and sovereignty, once challenged, is never absolute. April 11, 1961. The doors of Beit Ham in Jerusalem opened onto a courtroom transformed for a single purpose: to put a man and a chapter of history on trial. In the center, encased behind bulletproof glass, sat Adolf Eichmann, expression blank, hands folded, the focus of a world's gaze. Over the next 4 months, 112 witnesses stepped forward. Many were survivors who had never spoken publicly about the camps, the trains, the selections. Their voices, amplified for the first time by television cameras, carried the details of the Holocaust into living rooms across continents. Each testimony built a record not just of one man's orders, but of a machinery of destruction, deportation lists, timetables, and the numbers tattooed on forearms. The trial unfolded in 3 languages, with daily videotapes shipped to networks from New York to Warsaw. Prosecutor Gideon Hausner called survivors not only to prove Eichmann's role, but to make the experience of the Holocaust undeniable. Their accounts of families torn from homes, of children lost at the ramp, of the silence that followed, became the trial's living evidence. Eichmann, through it all, claimed he was a functionary, a bureaucrat obeying orders. Yet document after document, each bearing his signature, traced the path from Berlin's offices to the gates of Auschwitz. On December 15, 1961, the court delivered its verdict: guilty on all counts, including crimes against humanity and crimes against the Jewish people. The sentence, death by hanging, was announced with the world watching. Appeals failed. Just after midnight on June 1, 1962, Adolf Eichmann was executed. His ashes were scattered at sea beyond any border. The trial's impact stretched far beyond the verdict. For the first time, the Holocaust had been placed before the world as lived memory, not just as a record of numbers, but as the testimony of those who endured. The glass booth, the survivor voices, and the daily broadcasts reshaped how history would remember both the crime and the reckoning. On June 1, 1962, Adolf Eichmann was executed in Israel, his ashes scattered at sea. No grave, no monument, only documents and testimony left behind. Operation Black Tulip, involving 11 agents and a 40-second capture, exposed how forged identities and official indifference let war criminals vanish after the Holocaust. The United Nations Security Council condemned Israel's breach of Argentine sovereignty in Resolution 138. But the trial that followed set a new standard for public reckoning with genocide. Some details, like the precise words spoken at the moment of Eichmann's capture, remain disputed or classified, with memoirs offering conflicting accounts. But the core facts are clear. A bureaucrat who managed mass murder was found, tried, and sentenced under international scrutiny. Today, the legal and moral debates sparked by this operation continue to shape how the world pursues justice beyond borders. The Eichmann case proved that even when records are incomplete, accountability can cross continents, and history does not forget.